Picture a narrow river in Devon on a drizzly morning. Reeds whispering, alder branches dipping into the water, and that faint, earthy smell you only notice when the air is properly damp. Now imagine a creature you might associate with Canada rather than the West Country. A beaver. Not a cartoonish builder with a hard hat, but a hefty, sharp-toothed engineer with a talent for turning a fast, straight channel into something slower, messier, and rather often more alive. In today's episode, we're looking at a very British sort of controversy: the return of the beaver. It's a story about rivers, farms, floodplains, village politics, scientific evidence, and the odd moment where someone in Wellies says, with complete sincerity, "Well, the beavers have moved in, and we're just going to have to get on with it." If that sounds quaint, it isn't always. These animals can be brilliant, but they can also be a proper headache. Still, the bigger question is this: are beavers a genuine solution to some of our environmental woes, or are we romanticizing a fuzzy-tailed fix? To set the scene, beavers were once native to Britain. They lived in our wetlands and wooded riverbanks for thousands of years. Then, thanks to hunting and habitat loss, they vanished, essentially wiped out by the early modern period. For centuries, rivers were managed without them, and we became used to waterways that were straightened, dredged, and treated like drains for moving water off land as quickly as possible. That approach made a certain kind of sense if you were intent on squeezing every last acre into production and keeping roads and railways dry. Yet it also created knock-on effects that we're now paying for. Flashier floods, rivers that erode their banks, silt clogging, spawning gravels, and wetlands disappearing like a magician's trick. When you remove the messy bits of a river, the bends, the backwaters, the marshy margins, you reduce its ability to cope with extremes. And extremes, as anyone who's glanced at the weather lately will tell you, are becoming rather more common. Enter the beaver, not as a mascot, but as a process. Beavers don't just sit in water looking cute. They fell small trees, drag branches, pack mud, and build dam structures that slow water down, spread it out, and create ponds and wetlands behind them. In ecological terms, they increase habitat complexity, which is a fancy way of saying they make rivers less boring, and nature, generally speaking, thrives on variety. Now, let's be clear. Beaver dams aren't like concrete flood defenses. They are leaky, dynamic, and constantly changing. Water seeps through them, flows around them, and sometimes overtops them. The beaver repairs as needed, not according to a council maintenance schedule, but based on instinct and immediate feedback. It's an oddly compelling form of management. Decentralized, responsive, and utterly uninterested in paperwork. The claim you often hear sometimes with a bit of evangelical zeal is that beavers reduce flooding. The evidence is nuanced, and nuance is not always popular in public debate. Beaver dams can attenuate peak flows in small catchments, particularly in headwater streams where water moves quickly after heavy rain. By holding water back and releasing it more slowly, they can reduce the sudden surge that overwhelms downstream channels. However, rivers are complicated systems. In very large catchments or during extreme rainfall events, the effect of a few dams may be modest compared with the sheer volume of water. Yet, even then, the cumulative impact across a landscape can matter, especially when combined with other measures like restoring floodplains, planting riparian woodland, and changing soil management on farms. And it's not just flooding. Beaver ponds trap sediment. That can sound dull, but it's hugely significant. Sediment is often loaded with nutrients and pollutants, fertilizer runoff, soil particles, bits of whatever we've been washing into our waterways. When ponds capture that material, water downstream can become clearer and cleaner. Fish like salmon and trout, which need clean gravel beds for spawning, can benefit. So can insects, plants, and birds. One of the most striking changes is the creation of wetlands. Britain has lost an enormous proportion of its wetlands over the last couple of centuries, largely to drainage. Wetlands are not merely soggy wastelands. They're biodiversity powerhouses and carbon stores. They're also buffers, sponges in the landscape. When beavers create pond complexes, you often see dragonflies, amphibians, water voles, and a bewildering variety of wading birds turning up as if they've received a rather exclusive invitation. So, is it all spot on? Well, fair enough. Here comes the awkward bit. Beavers don't read land registry documents. They don't know where the boundary is between wildlife corridor and someone's livelihood. A beaver dam in the wrong place can flood agricultural land, waterlog fields, and block drainage ditches. For a farmer who's already operating on tight margins, losing a patch of productive land can be more than an inconvenience. It can be the difference between staying afloat and going under. There's also the issue of trees. Beavers fell trees, usually smaller ones, but they'll have a go at larger trunks if the mood takes them. Along some rivers, people are keen on riparian woodland restoration, so this isn't necessarily a problem. But in parks, gardens, and places with valuable heritage trees, beavers can cause damage that feels personal. It's one thing to talk about ecosystem processes on the radio. It's another to find your favorite willow slumped into the water because a nocturnal rodent fancied a bit of interior design. This is why most modern beaver projects in Britain involve management strategies. People fit tree guards wire mesh around trunks so beavers can't gnaw them. They install flow devices, sometimes called beaver deceivers, which sound like a joke but are, in fact, clever bits of kit. Pipes or structures that allow water to pass through a dam at a controlled level, reducing upstream flooding while leaving the dam intact. It's an attempt to compromise, which is, let's be honest, practically a national sport. Then there's the legal and political dimension. Beavers are protected in many contexts, which means you can't simply remove them because they're inconvenient. Yet there must be mechanisms for dealing with serious conflicts. That requires licenses, monitoring, and local expertise, plus the willingness to pay for it. When budgets are tight, it's tempting for institutions to talk enthusiastically about rewilding while leaving landowners to cope with the consequences. That, unsurprisingly, can sour the mood. It's worth noting that Britain's beaver story is not one single narrative. Scotland has had established populations for years, particularly in Tayside, where beaver activity has sometimes collided with arable farming. There have been disputes, mitigation schemes, and heated conversations in village halls that would make for terrific theater if they weren't about real livelihoods. In England, the beaver's return has been a patchwork of trials and releases. One of the most cited examples is in Devon, where a monitored population showed benefits for water storage and wildlife. But each catchment is different. A steep, flashy stream in upland Wales behaves differently from a lowland river meandering through farmland. Anyone claiming a one-size-fits-all answer is, frankly, having a laugh. Let's zoom out a bit. Why are beavers showing up in our national conversation now? Partly because we're rethinking what we want from landscapes. For decades, the priority was efficiency. Straight rivers, drained fields, simplified habitats. Now we're realizing that simplification makes systems brittle. When a system is brittle, it breaks under stress, whether that's drought, flood, or biodiversity loss. Beavers, in a sense, represent the opposite: messy resilience. They create redundancy. Multiple channels, ponds, wet meadows, so that if one part fails, the whole system doesn't collapse. It's not neat, it's not always convenient, but it can be robust. There's also a cultural shift. Many people are, quite rightly, knackered by grim environmental news. The beaver offers a rare thing, a tangible, visible change that feels hopeful. You can stand by a stream that used to be a trickle in summer and see water held in a pond. You can watch herons hunting in shallow margins, hear frogs, notice that the place has come back to life. It's hard not to feel something when you see that, even if you're skeptical. But hope can become hype. So what does good policy look like? It probably looks boring, which is often a sign that it's sensible. It means careful site selection. It means ongoing monitoring, not just a flashy launch event and then silence. It means funding mitigation tools and compensating landowners when genuine losses occur. It means training local teams who can respond quickly Because if a culvert blocks or a field floods, you need more than a PDF. It also means honesty about trade-offs. A beaver pond may increase methane emissions in some conditions, although the net climate impact can vary depending on the landscape and the carbon benefits of restored wetlands. A dam might block certain fish movements, although in other cases, the created habitat can support fish populations. These are not reasons to abandon the idea, but they are reasons to do it properly. Perhaps the most important point is that beavers force a different conversation about control. For a long time, we've acted as if a river is something you can command. Straighten it, speed it up, push it between embankments, and assume it will behave. Beavers remind us that water has its own agenda. The more we fight that agenda, the more we pay for it in engineering and repairs. In a way, the beaver is a test of our maturity. Can we accept a landscape that isn't micromanaged? Can we tolerate a degree of inconvenience in exchange for long-term stability and biodiversity? Or will we demand that nature behave like a tidy municipal service, predictable, scheduled, and out of sight? If you ever visit a beaver site, you'll probably hear two kinds of stories. One person will say, "It's brilliant, mate. It's transformed the place." Another will say, "Blimey, it's flooded the bottom field again." Both can be true. The challenge is designing a system where those truths can coexist without turning into a culture war. So, what should you take away from this? Beavers are not magic, but they are powerful. They are not universally welcome, but they are undeniably effective at creating wetlands and slowing water in the right conditions. They are, above all, a reminder that ecological restoration isn't just about animals, it's about people, land use, money, and the constant negotiation of shared space. Next time you walk along a river and see a knot stump shaped like a pencil, or you spot a sudden widening of the channel into a pond fringed with reeds, pause for a moment. You might be looking at a small piece of Britain's future. A future that is a bit messier, quite wilder, and if we handle it with care, better able to cope with whatever the weather decides to throw at us. Cheers for listening. If you'd like, listen again and note down the expressions and turns of phrase that sound particularly British, and see how they're used in context. With that, you're sorted for today.